Hi, my name is Vanessa Eve, and I am the Director of Community Relations for the StreamMate Network. I'm also the organizer for StreamMate's community initiative, Elevate, which celebrates the individuals who are working to make a positive impact for the adult and sex work communities. I am joined today by adult performer and Elevate's community partner for March 2025, Ebony Mystique, and Taurus Jerelds, founder and CEO of MPOWERR Health and Wellness of Atlanta. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Both Ebony and Taurus, you guys will be sharing your knowledge about all things related to current adult testing protocol so our community can stay informed and also stay healthy.
Love it.
Yes. So I also want to include a quick disclaimer that this conversation is for informational purposes only and is not medical advice. Please consult a medical professional for any health questions or concerns that you may have. So before we dive into our discussion, let's take a moment for introductions. So ladies first, we'll start with Ebony. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and your background.
My name is Ebony Mystique. I'm an adult performer, mainstream. I've been in the adult industry for about almost going on 5 years now, happily so. And I'm doing well there. Historically, I am also a registered nurse. So that's where my health background comes from. And currently, I'm not practicing because, of course, I'm doing mainstream adult. However, I'm still licensed. I'm still all about health and safety and wellness, and I take that very seriously. And it helps me with my career in the adult industry. So that's pretty much me as far as this is concerned. Yeah.
My name is Taurus Jerelds. I am the owner and CEO of MPOWERR Health and Wellness. And I'm bringing about 20, I would say about a good 20 to 25 years almost of sexual health education, sexual health epidemiology, and disease investigation knowledge into the arena of the adult filming industry with being a PASS certified testing facility, running a day-for-day sexual health clinic, and working on the state, local, state, and federal level in sexual health and epidemiology and public health.
So let's jump right into our topic today, beginning with testing protocol. But before we get into the actual protocol, I want to know who is regulating the testing standards for the adult industry at this moment.
As far as I know, PASS, is that correct? Do you agree, Taurus?
Yes, that is correct. The industry is the testing and safety standards as far as sexual transmitted infection and onset safety is regulated by PASS.
In terms of the protocol, is this more suggested or is it mandatory to follow the protocol that is being set by PASS?
So if you are currently working in the mainstream adult film industry, PASS has testing mandates that govern testing for the entire adult filming industry, and for those of you or those performers that work in mainstream, and we consider mainstream to be studio production, pro amateur studio production, anywhere where they're asking you for testing standards that have been mandated by the industry, which will come down from PASS.
Now let's get into the testing protocol, particularly for professional adult sets. So this would pertain to adult performers and professional studios. Where do people go for testing? How often? Ebony, from a performer standpoint, can you just relay some of your experiences as far as how testing tends to flow in the process of, actually creating this content?
So the standard is 7 to 14 days for you to get a test and get retested. As far as I am aware, the protocol, is the blood and the urine, and we do swabbing across the board. There's a bunch of things that we test for. Old STDs you heard of, probably new STDs some people haven't heard of, but we try to keep things as current as possible as far as I'm concerned, as far as what I know was mandated. And swabbing has been kind of a new mandate for the U.S. film companies. They do it a lot in Europe, but for the US companies, within, I believe, the last 1 to 2 years, that's the swabbing became part of the full panel. As far as testing for me, I use MPOWERR. I use Taurus most of the time. In my past, before I had met him, I used to go to talent testing. There are, like he mentioned, industry industry standard testing facilities. You can't go to your doctor's office. We're talking about film, like mainstream film. You can't go to your doctor's office and get that test, or go to Planned Parenthood or something like that. They don't. Utilize those tests. There are specific past certified labs that we go to, and that's what the production studios, directors, producers, talent, which is barcoded to make sure that it's uh, not being faked or anything like that. There's a system of checking for things. That's what they use, is the past certified lab testing facilities. Taurus owning MPOWERR being one of them. And he's in Atlanta, I'm in LA, and he has even it's like mail orders. He'll send you the swabs. You go to the lab. They go ahead and process the swabs, do the blood and the urine like they would do anywhere else. And you usually get results between 24 to 48 hours, sometimes 72. And I mean, it's because production is like that it's a fast turnaround for you to get your results. So with that being said, I find it very easy. I find it very, there is no objective to me about testing. So this has just become something, part of my daily lifestyle. I know every 7 to 14 days I need a test, because no test for me equals no work. So I like the way they, and of course, if there are issues, they contact you and you kind of get treated and take it from there. And they also are there for retesting, so you can get back to work, making sure that you're okay if things do tend to come up. But I love it. I mean, I feel like when I was a civilian and not in the industry, I probably was not as adamant about testing unless I had symptoms. Because that's usually how people live their lifestyle. But for me, whether I have symptoms or not, it's just part of my daily lifestyle. I
Okay.
feel safer with those protocols in place.
And there's some transparency there as far as your status. Is there a certain amount of time prior to production or showing up on a set that you need to have these tests ready by?
Well, because the turnaround is so fast, sometimes I go the day before. It depends on how much I've been working previously. And lets me know how I am at that point, at that moment that I have to shoot, you know? But I try not to let my tests go, like, when I'm like 10, 11 days, kind of, and it's almost close to 14 days, I do try to set up my testing so I don't fall short of not being tested or not knowing my status. So I'm always getting it done.
But it sounds like then almost like the closer to the actual production date, the better, because you know it's just the most up-to-date information.
I like that. I like to live that way. And I do, it's not that I wouldn't shoot somebody on a 13th day. You know, they got another day, 14 days. However, I do tend to feel a little bit more, I don't know, I feel a little bit more safer when I do see what we call like a fresh test. It's not that
Mhm.
it's not current, like a fresh test right before I shoot, because people work a lot sometimes in between the 7 to 14 days. So I do feel better.
Understandably. Um, and Taurus, what kinds of STIs are included in these different types of tests, swabs and blood, urine?
Yeah, so currently the Gold panel, the Gold Standard Performer panel, is what we call it pretty much across the board. Includes blood testing for virology samples or virology STIs and bacterial STI, which would be syphilis. So we're testing for HIV, both ABAG combo and HIV PCR viral load, just to make sure that we can catch any type of acute infections that may happen in between testing. So we're testing for HIV as sensitive as possible on current up-to-date testing modules and testing technology. So all the testing across the board for the industry is of high standard and within a current up-to-date testing guideline per the CDC guidelines and laboratory science, for making sure that we are testing as accurately and as fast and efficient and effectively as possible. So once again, we're testing for HIV, hepatitis B and C. We're testing for syphilis, which is a bacterial infection that we test for in the blood also. We're also testing for microbiology samples, really small bacterial samples such as gonorrhea, chlamydia, trichomonas in urine. We're testing for mycoplasma genitalium, which is another small, very lively organism that we test for in the urogenital tract that lives there naturally, which is a new test that has been added to the panel. But when we're testing for gonorrhea and chlamydia, we're testing for it in just about every orifice that performers may use when they go to work. So we're testing the urogenital tract. We're testing the mouth, the throat, and we're testing the rectum also, and that's the purpose of the swabs, to detect gonorrhea and chlamydia that could be in those areas that we normally would not be getting if we were not swabbing those areas, and people are getting tested for gonorrhea and chlamydia from just urine samples only, and we're missing bacteria that's living in those other areas because fluids travel. So now we have pretty much a more of a comprehensive panel as possible that is financially feasible for a lot of performers to be able to afford around the $215 to maybe $245 price range. Could be a little bit more expensive than that, depending on where you're testing. But we're testing for all of those infections. So as I said, HIV, hepatitis B and C, syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, trichomonas, and MGen, mycoplasma genitalium.
Okay. For any of the past certified labs, then, is it safe to say that the the panels, is it standard then across the board for every past certified lab, or do certain labs only do certain tests and then everything else is elective?
If they are currently a current pass certified testing facility, we are all testing for the exact same infection. We do have some other testing facilities that are excuse me, that are not pass certified, such as TTS and, if I'm not mistaken, CET. But they are running the same test as well. So we don't want people to think just because they're not pass certified at the current moment that they're not getting the same testing. They are getting the same testing. They're just not currently participating in pass. So yes, if you're testing at any of the pass certified testing facilities or the other testing partners that are currently not working within the pass system but are still providing testing for the industry, you are getting the same testing. Yes.
Okay. Ebony, whenever you have, I don't know if you see the tests, or do you as talent actually visually see the tests of your scene partners, or is it usually just, I guess, approved through the production studio that you're working with at the time?
We actually, some production studios, that's not, it's like it's not part of their job description to somewhat check for tests. Some do because they have the flow of big productions and they have the producer code to kind of check tests. And that's sometimes you'll find out if there's an issue they'll find out if there's an issue before you do. Remind me of the flow of the question again.
Yeah. Do you visually see the tests of your
Right.
scene
Sorry
partners?
about that. Absolutely, totally. There is no objections. There's no, we can't talk about not seeing a test. If you're not, that's like part of you being responsible for yourself as an adult in this industry and working in this field. You can't take nobody's word for it. You can't just look on a screenshot. It's a barcoding system. You watch the person, and it goes the same for you. It goes the same way. We do it together. You watch the person log in. You do the barcode so you can see that it's valid. It's not fake. And you go over the dates. First of all, are very important. And every single thing that they are testing for, thing for you to be cleared for work. I would not ever give anyone the bad advice of saying, do not check and be due diligent about your scene partner's test. That is like numero uno.
Yeah.
Because again, no test, no work. And that's again why I believe they have the standardized testing and they have these protocols in place. A lot more in depth than what your doctor office would do in a regular just STD screening, STI screening. So it is your due diligence as a performer for yourself and for your scene partner, for anybody else after that scene, for you to be responsible and make sure that you are looking at the right things and it is as what it should be, which is clear for work.
Okay. So that's completely, it's not taboo to ask to see someone's test results. If anything, that's just part of the process, is viewing each other's results in real time. not
Right,
having to rely on some sort of administrator from the production studio to convey that, yes, we saw the test and yes, it was cleared.
right,
Okay, so, well, that's good. That's reassuring. I would feel reassured by seeing it firsthand versus hearing it from someone else that they were,
right.
but okay. In the rare occasion then that something does get flagged on a test, Taurus, is it usually the testing facility that is then, setting things in motion to convey that information, or how does that work in our
So
industry?
most of the time when a performer tests positive for a sexually transmitted infection, that performer is normally notified by the testing facility that they have a positive test and we can't clear you at the moment for work. So yes, the performer is notified. To my knowledge, the performer is notified by the testing facility. If you were to test with Empower, I do my due diligence and anybody that's working on my team to make sure that labs aren't posted for talent to see. Before we blow your phone up like a stalker, we're going to call you because we need you to know that, hey, you're not clear to work at this current moment because something may be positive, and we don't want people to open up a test panel and see something in red writing or see something showing that it is abnormal or out of range or positive, and you not totally understand what it is that you're seeing and proceed to work, or that positive test is overlooked because you didn't focus on what you were reading at the time because you just saw a bunch of green in between all the green that show whatever the color coding is. You miss the flag that shows that you have an abnormal test or a positive test. So we do our best to make sure that we reach out to that talent first before we post those labs. And if we can't get in touch with the talent in a timely fashion, then we'll go ahead and post. But we don't give them a clearance to work report, which is normally what a lot of performers are looking for. They're looking for that barcode to scan or to share with their scene partners or production to show that they're clear to work. And normally, when you don't get one of those, it is because something on your actual lab report is showing positive, and performers are made aware of that positive information so that they can seek out treatment.
So then it is up to the performer to then convey that information to whomever she was working with, that, or he or she, or they, that they could not work then in that moment. Is that right?
Correct. At that moment, correct. At that moment, it is up to the individual performer that tests positive for something to notify their partners that they've test positive for something and invoke a series of testing for their partners that they may have been with in between that testing period. Um, Depending on the infection, PASS may jump in and help out with that partner notification um, before, like, in case, say it was a syphilis or an HIV outbreak type of situation. That is something that is going to need the hands of a little bit more people to make sure that everybody that could have been exposed has been made aware of that infection or that potential infection. But luckily and thankfully, we haven't had to deal with that, at least since we've been PASS certified for almost about 2 years now. The contact tracing and the partner notification for those things are pretty serious and robust, just to make sure that everybody has that information, that knowledge of potentially being exposed. But if it's general STIs, gonorrhea, chlamydia, trichomonas, MGN, we ask that performers exercise a modicum of professionalism and maturity to let their scene partners know that they may have worked with in between that time, that they may have tested positive since they shot or since they worked together, and they would kind of encourage them to go get retested or to get tested, just to dot some I's, cross some T's, and kind of rule out the blame game so that we all understand that everybody's consenting adults and STIs do happen, and sometimes they slip through the cracks depending on people's behavior and sexual activity. And at that point in time, we want performers to go ahead and just do the adult thing and do the mature thing and reach out to their partners and let them know that some additional testing may be necessary because of a positive test.
Okay, which I would feel would be effective enough. But in the instances, just to escalate it a little bit, we have seen cases of, moratoriums in the industry where essentially all production has been halted. Who would be the one to initiate a moratorium in that very rare occasion?
So PASS will be the governing body that will call the moratorium for the industry, um, and they do that by a collection of data from the performers and the organizations that work within the system and say, hey, we've had an increase in gonorrhea, chlamydia in the last 30 days, where we normally may not have as many, or we may have a situation like there's a syphilis outbreak or an HIV outbreak, and a moratorium needs to be called. PASS would be the governing body that would say, hey, we need to stop production. Everybody needs to retest, and the moratorium is going to last for the next 7 to 14 days until, you know, everybody that's working in the industry on the mainstream side of things that operate under those governing guidelines from PASS is retested. But like I said, we've had moratoriums, but they haven't been due to syphilis or HIV. We've pretty much got a good grip on monitoring infections and when moratoriums need to be called. Of course, PASS isn't called a moratorium for every positive gonorrhea and chlamydia test that happens in a 30-day time span when it's a decent amount or a understandable amount of positive results. We're talking about a kind of overnight, but not really overnight in reality type of situation where we've got 70, 80 people in the industry testing positive for, you know, a sexually transmitted infection. Then there lies a problem, because that's too many people in the working pool of people that participate in the PASS system to have an infection that has not been addressed from a industry entirety standard.
Okay.
From an industry, you know, an entire industry operation or procedure to make sure that everybody's notified, people are retested, and now everybody can go back to work safely.
Let's switch over to voluntary testing, particularly for independent content creators, which we've seen such a huge influx of, especially since the pandemic and a little bit before then. Ebony, have you worked with independent content creators, and did you notice that, if so, did you notice that the testing protocol, the flow of things was similar to the professional adult sets that you've worked on?
I don't, even if they independent, they work here, whatever, however you want to label it. If I'm working with somebody, they're gonna have to do the same standardized testing, do the same pass, as the same certified industry standard testing facilities. That again is part of my job. I feel like as an adult entertaining professional, to educate them about our way, because this is sex work and this is the way we do things. And if you want to shoot with me, we're gonna do it the best way possible. And as far as I'm concerned, it's what the industry has set forth. So I'll introduce them to Empower or Empower, because that's what I use. In previous times, it was talent testing or CET.
Okay. But it's not necessarily regulated though. It's testing, I mean, among,
Not in their world,
yeah.
but we coming into each other world. And I think that if you independent, that's cool. If we gonna shoot together, we gonna have to do it the way I do, the way it's supposed to be done in my mind. Or I'm not gonna take like a doctor, like a regular, no, because they could doctor that up. I can't check the barcode. You know, I just rather do it the way I'm used to doing it. And I haven't had any like problem about that. Actually, in the independent creator world, especially if they're having sex, a lot of them now, especially after the moratoriums and them meeting us and working with you know, adult film stars, they talk about they do the same thing now we do, a lot of them. They're like, oh, you got to go to talent testing or CET, because we kind of combining worlds. So a lot of the independent creators do want to work with adult film stars. So if we're gonna work, we're gonna just have to do it the best way possible, and that's the way I know to do it, is the protocol.
Yeah, the standard way.
Mhm.
Okay, so how would talent be able to verify a test result's validity then? What should they be looking for? Obviously, you need to log in, okay, let's say in the hypothetical situation that they are not logging in front of each other, into their pass account, but instead they are showing like a screenshot of their test result. Is there a way to verify that that test is valid at that?
That's not valid. That's not gonna work.
A
Screenshots
screenshot.
not gonna work.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not even something. You probably gonna get canceled on a no list, just like you playing. Like, you're not gonna do real well in my world with that
Okay.
kind of stuff. Well, it gets a little, somebody like that, especially when if we communicated and you know what I'm just showing you how I'm respecting you before we, get into shooting. I would expect the same thing. So if I'm not showing you no screenshot or something like that, I took my time, my money. I'm trying to be safe with this. I would expect the same thing. A screenshot, I would be like, is that fake? Or like, I wouldn't even feel comfortable. That would like give me like the bad spidey senses. Like, what's this? Like, it's not gonna work for me.
Okay, so
Right.
loud and
We,
clear.
we do have ways for talent to verify testing, i.e. the pass database for those performers that are participating in pass. We as facilities, we input every clear and even unclear test to work in the pass database. So you have multiple ways to verify your scene partners testing that are working, that are testing with that are testing through past certified testing facilities and the other testing facilities by scanning those barcodes. And the purpose of those QR codes and barcodes should replicate the information that you're supposed to see on your partner's phone, on your scene partner's phone. And if that information isn't verbatim, then you know something's not right. And you can't really do that with screenshots. You can't really do that on portals that are not live and active. So whether you're a mainstream adult film performer that's working within the industry, or you're a new content creator, because post-pandemic or during pandemic, the pandemic showed everybody that they're an independent content creator within their own rights to produce their own content. So whether you're coming straight from I've never done any type of sex work before to from never doing any type of sex work, or you are working in the industry and saying, hey, now I have the ability to produce my own content, we still have a way to make sure that everybody is safe. And what we want people to do is get in the habit of taking that extra 3, 4, 5 minutes to, log in to these portals with your scene partners to show in real time these lab results so that nobody has to question the screenshot. We see a lot of times people fake test results for whatever reason, whether they couldn't afford to get tested at the time, whether they may be, hiding an infection that they don't want anyone to know. We don't want people to have to deal with that. So we put mechanisms in place so that talent have the safety tools to be able to protect themselves and make sure that people are getting real-time information. So yes, that would be logging into that facility's online portal directly in front of your scene partners, and everybody's doing it together and you're seeing them do it, versus you're over in a corner pulling up your test results and I don't know what avenue you went through to get to that final PDF copy. No, I need to scan your QR code and it needs to come up on my phone, the way that it's supposed to come up. And these dates need to be within the last 7 to 14 days. And we have a lot of people that I know when we first became pass certified, a lot of people were posting their lab results on social. And we were trying to discourage that because it gives people that framework of an idea to falsify a test report, not understanding that there are mechanisms to verify those testing dates and testing panels. And when that's done, then you see, okay, now somebody's being called out for faking a test. But we want people to, on the front end, verify that right then and there so that we don't have to worry about that after the fact. Go ahead and scan that QR code while everybody's, showing their test results to make sure that that information pops up the way that it's supposed to pop up. Watching them log into those electronic portals, even if for independent content creators that are not working in mainstream and they are still testing. The name of the game is to be tested. We want people to go into sex work tested. But even in those methods, there are a lot of testing facilities or testing clinics and healthcare clinics that have an online portal for you to be able to log into that information versus taking a screenshot and taking that person's word for it, because screenshots can be easily created. And that is the behavior change that we want people to adopt to keep everybody safe. Because when we're talking about sex work, a lot of times people aren't breaking down mainstream performers and content creators. They're grouping everybody in together as sex work when something hits the fan, or when something on the media has now taken a turn for a not so tasteful media outlet. And if everybody's practicing that verification in whichever form that may be verified the same way, then we're kind of better protected as an entity and as an industry.
In your experience, and this goes for both of you, I mean, have you seen education for incoming performers who are newer to this industry and they don't necessarily know people who could teach them the ropes? Like, is there information that you've seen that's available widely? Okay.
Pass for sure. Your agent, if you have one, they know or they should be aware. But pass is our government, we should say. So that's where we go to look up current, like if there's any current STDs or STIs that have come out and they testing for it. That's where we'll find that out. If there's it's just a place where you can go for information. To answer your question, I will go to pass um, before I will go anywhere. And most of the time, if you have an agent or if you're in the industry, you should know about the government that you're working in. So pass is not something that people don't. At least I'm not. When I first got in, I knew pass existed, but I learned that from my management at the time. But this information is available and then person to person. But of course, if you want to get the things that are just not set word of mouth and you want to get, the knowledge that's set forth, I will go to pass. What is it, pass.org or something like that? We'll make sure that we get the information, but definitely I will go there first before I go anywhere to kind of keep myself current and knowing what's going on. It's something people should know because there is a government in the industry
Yes.
for these things.
So, as Ebony said, PASS will be the governing organization that governs health and safety when it comes to STIs and stuff like that for performers. However, we do realize that a lot of new performers and some old performers in the industry or sex workers in the industry don't have the best sexual health education, and that could be a nature versus nurture environmental type of thing where sexual health education has been taken out of schools and nobody's been given that real information about sexually transmitted infections and sexual activity. Um, they, that's what I've been doing. That's what I do. That's what I do day for day. I run a sexual health clinic. And that's what I've done for various organizations on the state, federal, and local level, providing sexual health education, disease-specific education, virology and epidemiology information, studying infectious diseases pertaining to sexually transmitted infections, and being able to educate sex workers and providers on sexual health education. There are a lot of times when I was working in the government sector, we were educating providers on treating syphilis, textbook syphilis that they didn't understand because they didn't see it day for day like we did, and understanding that there's still some sexual health education across the board that needs to be provided to just general Americans. But when they get into the world of sex work, it is vitally important that that information is provided to them in a manner that is factual, and that is scientifically based, and making sure that they understand that working in the industry does come with some level of risk because you are being sexually involved with multiple people at any given point in time, and there's always a chance of exposure if people have personal lives. We have performers that are in relationships. We have performers that are married. We have independent single individuals that still have a personal sex life. And when they don't have that information, understanding of sexual health to protect themselves, they're at risk of becoming, exposed by other people that may not have that sexual health education as well, in their environments to keep them safe. And while they're tested, in between testing, their personal sex life is still happening, which means they could be being exposed in that arena and coming to work the next day and exposing their scene partners, and may not know that information until symptoms arise or into their next test. So it is vitally important that individuals that are interested in coming into the adult film arena are educated with that sexual health education, basic STI, STD education that they may have never heard before, to dispel some of the myths that they may have been provided by people that didn't have the knowledge. And that is vitally important. That is something that I myself, as a STI clinic owner and public health professional, thrive to make sure that anytime people need that information, we're there to try to give it to them. We've been in many of Twitter spaces, post moratorium, doing moratorium, providing sexual health education for performers that have been working in the industry for quite some time that needed information and happened to miss it at some point in time, or dispelling myths about ways sexually transmitted infections are transmitted or exposed. Um, so it is vitally important. It is vitally important that that information be provided um, in a clear and cohesive manner for performers that are new to the industry.
Yeah. So although there might not be any kind of formal onboarding provided blanketed by the adult industry, it's important for performers especially to advocate for themselves, for empowering themselves with this type of knowledge and being proactive to, make sure that they know what they're getting into.
Like Ebony said, PAST is the organization that provides that information on their site. And we try to educate everybody on participating in PAST, or at least going to the website to see what it's all about at least one time. I know that that's normally what I advise most of our new performers that come through MPOWERR for testing, or that I meet in the arena about testing. Even just sending them to the CDC's website so that they can learn about sexual health education information, then being available, being there for them to ask any questions once they view that information. So there are resources. We just have to make sure that we're getting it into the hands as a primary approach versus secondary approach once something has happened, or somebody's been exposed, or somebody's received a phone call from a fellow performer stating that they may have popped positive for an STI, to keep that new baby in the industry from freaking out, or teaching them how to handle STIs in a very mature adult manner. Because when everybody's left with trying to play the blame game, we still don't get any decent education, because everybody's concerned about where it came from. You gave me this, you gave me that, but it takes two adults to be able to, come together to work. So everybody has to have a sense of responsibility for each other.
I know what you mean by the blame game. I think I've seen a few instances of that on especially Twitter, when something happens and then people start pointing fingers, but it really doesn't really accomplish anything
No,
doing it that way. So, okay, let's take it back then to swabs. And you guys had touched on this earlier, but is there an advantage between the different types of testing in terms of, the actual results?
talk about the microbiology testing, and when it comes to incubation periods for STIs after exposure to be detected on a test and things of that nature. Those swabs came. So the addition of the swabs were vitally important, like I said, to help catch infections that were living in other orifices of the body due to fluid travel that were not being tested at the time. But we had performers going to work becoming infected with gonorrhea and chlamydia when they had just gone to a testing facility and got tested and had a negative test. So the question was, how am I doing my due diligence to make sure that I'm tested to go to work, but I'm coming back from work with something that I didn't go into work with, which was the idea. But because there was no oral and rectal swabbing, you didn't really know that you had an infection in your throat, because that area wasn't being tested. Gonorrhea and chlamydia can't survive the transport of the journey from the throat through the GI tract, stomach fluid, stomach acids, and all of that to be detected urogenitally. It just doesn't work like that. So performers were getting tested with a negative gold panel at the time that did not include swabs. Hey, my urine is clear for gonorrhea, chlamydia, and trichomonas. Everything else is clear now. I'm clear to work, but they were harboring infections in their mouth and in their rectum because fluids travel. So that's why that need for those swabs were there, to help catch that extra bacteria that had not crossed barriers in the body, maybe from urogenital tract to rectum or in the mouth, so that performers could be tested thoroughly and not go to work exposing someone unintentionally because they did not know that there was an infection living in that area. So yes, there was a myth that or just some unclear information that if one area was positive, then the other area would automatically be positive. And I've had to dispel a lot of that just from telling people, hey, I own an STI clinic. I see it happen every day where somebody comes in with a negative urogenital test for gonorrhea and chlamydia, but we swab their throat and we swab their rectum and they have a positive test result. It all depends on fluids traveling at the time, or at the time of testing post exposure. It takes sometimes it takes bacteria a while to replicate and colonize enough to be able to be detected on a test. So you may in theory or later on down the line had both infections, vaginally and rectally, but at the time that you were tested, only one of them was producing enough bacteria to be detected on a test. And that was the disconnect and the missing part of the information that performers didn't quite understand. So yes, it was vitally important to add those swabs. That way, we're not telling you that you're clear to work because your genital test was negative, but you're positive. Your rectal swab was positive for gonorrhea and chlamydia, or your throat swab was positive for gonorrhea and chlamydia, and then you go to work and you use those areas that weren't tested.
I would like to say personally, that's how me and Taurus met and became very close and very good. I love what he does. I love just him, period. In the beginning of like when swabs weren't a thing, I had took the initiative to get on Twitter, something I usually don't even do. I'm very private, but I took the initiative to get on Twitter and speak about what I was going through currently, which, as he had just mentioned, well, currently at that time, which he had just mentioned, it wasn't about me being dirty or just shooting with anybody. This was a very big company for a very big scene with top performers, and it was just a phone call. One of my co-performers told me she went to her doctor office. She wasn't feeling particularly great, but just went for a checkup. She decided to add some swabs. I guess her doctor office did that. And she called me and told me, after I'm cleared. We were just doing urine and blood at that time. That's what Taurus was just talking about, that I was to go ahead and get tested. And when I go get tested, ask for swabs. And lo and behold, I was not cleared to work. I was cleared to work from the original panel, the blood and urine, as he just mentioned, but they didn't test my throat, and that's where my infection was. And so I took the initiative just to get on Twitter and run my damn mouth. And I don't know what I was looking for, but I was looking for something. I was looking for pass. So I had got to pass because I wanted to know, how is this happening to me, and who else is this happening to? And I got on Twitter, and then we found out that's actually a few people after that we was telling them to get swabbed, or go in there and get swabbed and see what happens. They popped positive also, and Taurus was a very, very, very big. I mean, went from a day to, like, I don't know, Taurus. It was like 2 weeks, and it's just like we're on there for 12 hours a day. Anytime we needed him, he was there to explain things, and so he was a forward in the mandate also, getting the mandated me and performers. So I would say, like, when you had asked the question about, like, do talent kind of drive kind of like protocols and stuff like that, kind of, or something like that you had asked. My thought about it was a mandate or something. My thought about it is that yes, because if enough of us come together and we got a problem going on, they did listen, and they did see it as a necessary need to put swabs in on the full panel after this situation. And that was we had a monitorium called and everything. So I just wanted to mention that Torres is very, very knowledgeable. He's just a loving person. He does care about the talent, the performers, and being educated the way they're supposed to be. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Thank
Focus on care in healthcare. Yeah, because I remember around that time and seeing you both on Twitter with these huge rooms, and I sat in on some of those conversations quietly, but you shared a lot of information at that time. I was gonna ask you, Ebony, do you feel like, especially in that moment, is there still a lot of stigma even within our own industry connected to if you come back and your test is flagged and you're not able to work? Do you feel like there's judgment or stigma in our
No,
country?
no, I think that we understand that it's a risk that we take
Yeah.
doing this job. However, I do feel like the stigma would be if you know that that you uncleared to work and you still doing stuff which you're not supposed to be doing, which is like you're not supposed to be working. So I feel like that's the problem, or that's where the stigmas come across in, or people that are shooting without being tested at all, and then they pop positive for something, and that's when the name, what you call it, name blame blame names,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, that's where that comes to, because they're not being responsible for each other. So I think that's where the stigmas come from. But like industry worker to industry worker, it'd be like, girl, we'll see you when you get back type things. You know, it ain't like ill or nothing. It become a problem when you intentionally do some stuff to somebody knowing that you not supposed to be doing that. That's where the problem becomes. And you're gonna get canceled super fast because cancel culture, especially in the adult industry, is huge because of course everybody likes to use social media and talk about all their problems all the time. So you're not gonna go too far with that kind of mess. They'll literally you'll be like a no. You know, people know this, like not shooting with him. Bad. Or her. Yeah.
All right, we're going to move into our final question then, and I'm just going to kind of lump these two things together. But it is about accessibility to testing, so costs, as well as any resources that you may be aware of for performers who maybe need a little bit of extra help with accessing testing, especially if, obviously they want to work, but then you can't work until you have the test. So in your opinion, is testing accessible for industry members, and how much does it cost roundabout for testing at this
I'll get
time?
it to Taurus.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would honestly say that depending on where you are geographically, testing is accessible, and with the organizations that are becoming pass certified now that Ian and his team are bringing aboard to add to the current testing facilities that are already aboard doing the testing, that seems to be a lot of our goals to make testing accessible and affordable. MPOWERR is a nonprofit, so we kind of operate a little bit more differently. My daily MO is to get up and find funding to help subsidize the cost of healthcare, whether we're providing STI testing or we're providing chronic disease management, whether we're providing PrEP, whether we're providing HIV care, whether we're providing things that are not related to industry at all. MPOWERR is a nonprofit healthcare organization that I wanted to make sure that it had a reach across the globe to help people access care. But when we talk about testing for performers, there are a plethora of testing options available when it comes to getting tested. You have free organizations like AHF, other smaller nonprofits that provide STI testing in areas. We want people to be tested. Whether you're getting tested with an industry standard facility or not is a different type of situation based on where you're trying to go in the industry. So as Ebony said before, if you're trying to get into mainstream, if you're trying to work with performers that are working in mainstream, 9 times out of 10, they will not be subsidizing their testing options because you can't afford to test with one of the testing facilities. Because at the end of the day, it's their health and their safety that they're putting on the line to work with you. And the industry is already doing things a certain way. And when in Rome, you do what the Romans do. You do when you come aboard an industry that's already existing and you're new, you have to learn the ropes of the way that industry is moving. So there are a lot of performers that don't understand why they're getting, denied work from or collaboration opportunities from people because of testing. They may say, hey, I'm tested from my doctor's office. Yes, that's a valid test. But how am I supposed to, as your scene partner, verify that information is factual and valid when it's not a method that I can verify that because it's not an industry standard testing facility. So we want people to understand that, yes, there are testing options out there, but we want people to visit the PASS website to find out where they can get tested by PASS certified or one of the other partners that have been doing testing for quite some time for the industry, because that's just the way that the industry runs. And that is the purpose of the facilities, so that everybody's working together in a communal mindset to keep everybody safe.
In instances where a performer just didn't have the funds at the moment to afford testing, what usually, is there an option at that?
PASS has a performer subsidy fund
Okay.
where they're funded with some dollars that aren't as long as they used to be from partners of the industry and friends of the industry to kind of help performers deal with some of the offset of testing costs. And I do see the performer subsidy fund going in a different direction and becoming a lot more usable once they continue to streamline that process to make sure that people are able to continue to benefit from that post-pandemic. But yes, there are some options. We have performers that donate to MPOWERR for testing costs to help people get tested. Miss B Nasty is one of those individuals who readily will help, you know, performers pay for testing if they can't afford to pay for testing. But once again, I heard Ebony make reference to something before about um, a professional coming to work. In a healthcare setting, we know as healthcare professionals, we have to come prepared with certain things to be able to do our job. Testing is one of the things that you need to have, that you have to come prepared with in order to do your job. You know, so what we try to help people understand is time and place. If you're in a place and time where you really can't afford to get tested, we need to find out how we can help you get to that point so that you're not cutting corners with testing and potentially putting yourself as a performer or independent content creator or someone else that you're working with in harm's way. Yes, the testing cost is not as inexpensive as we would like it, you know, but there's still a cost associated with it that has to be fulfilled by the facilities to cover the cost of testing. So, like I said before, I think testing is ranging anywhere from about right now with us, um, from about 185 bucks up to about 240 bucks. And that can also increase depending on what facility you're testing with and if they have an actual facility in your area or if you're using, you know, their third party testing partners and collaborative partners and things of that nature where other fees may be associated with that. So it can create a barrier for some people that are survival sex workers that are trying to keep a roof over their head and may not have the funding or the income from a regular 9 to 5 or this lavish career that's bringing in a lot of money and they want to dabble into sex work. No, it is a lot of people from all walks of life trying to make this thing work.
And that's why I would like to just add, well, before you decide to quit your day job and just do this adult work full throttle, you should have the finances and your stuff set up right to just leave your full job or just like not have a second job to supplement your income because not being tested and shooting, that's not an option. Like you have to be tested in my world. And I hope that that resonates for anybody, not just in my world, but anyone that is that's sexually active, period. Because you have to be able to, it's a lot more costly when you catch something and you can't work. And you got to take antibiotics and then you got to go get retested just to work. You can't even work on that test. Sometimes you got to test out twice. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, just things are the way they are for a reason. I wouldn't want to even play or question that. You know what I mean? I wouldn't even, or I wouldn't even feel comfortable shooting with a person, giving my body to. It's not all about the money because the money is cool, but it's not enough if I catch like something that I can't get rid of. And just in general, like it does something to your mind, it does something to how you feel about yourself. Um, and it's like even if you pop positive, you shouldn't even do solo creation at that time. If you're using toys, like as a woman, can't you transfer the toys? Like if I had gonorrhea in my throat and I
You can auto inoculate an infection in a different area if the toys are contaminated and they haven't been cleaned. So, say you were using your toys vaginally and then you insert the toys into your mouth, you've now just transferred that bacteria from one area of the body to another area of your body. Um, yeah, so that is 100% true, and that is also basic STI education that a lot of people are missing. Because a lot of people find other ways to. They may not be doing fluid exchange all the time, but the moment that they begin to do fluid exchange with other individuals and become infected or exposed, and then they go back home to their solo creation, they may not even know they're harboring an infection until they're tested again or symptoms arise and they're like, well, what is this? And now they have to go back and realize, well, what have I done? You know, and the toys that I've used, you know, the toys have been used on a lot of different orifices, or if they've been sharing toys with other individuals. Um, you know, there's just a lot of information that needs to be provided to people.
and it is an adult industry. Like these
Yeah.
are adults. So with that being said, you responsible enough to get on set or want to do the job. It's like if I went to the hospital and I forgot my stethoscope as a nurse. I can't really work because I got to listen to heart sounds and respiratory lungs and all that stuff. But I don't expect the hospital to provide me with the stethoscope. They got the little cheap ones that's for the people that forget that they actually going to work today. It's something that you need. So if you don't have a test, you can't work. And it would be really like kind of cliche to think that who's gonna pay for every time you gotta work? If you worked at McDonald's, how do you get there? You gotta get on the bus, or you gotta drive your car. You need gas to get in your car to go. It's just like being an adult. So even like shout out to Miss B Nasty. I donated a little bit of money to help with a few tests too, but like he said, that was to offset something. Or if you needed to be retested because during the moratorium and during the swabbing situation, people were wondering, okay, I just got swabbed. How I pop positive after treatment. How am I supposed to afford getting retested when I haven't been working? So stuff like that. So maybe like once or twice, but you can't expect the industry to help you be an adult and go to work. Like you need to be tested to work. I don't want people to get it confused or like to try to think past it or go around the bush. It is kind of what it is. And if you ain't got the money to get tested, you shouldn't be working because you can't fake a test. You shouldn't do that. So it's just like figure it out.
MGen test right now and MGen infectious, that's putting somebody out of work for at least 2 weeks.
At least 2
Is a
weeks.
14-day treatment. So if you had shoots lined up on that fresh test that you just got today, and you test positive for MGen, you're now out of work for 14 days and having to figure out how I'm going to supplement that income while I'm treating. And that's just 14 days of treatment. You still have to wait a while before you get retested. Just medication, has had the time to take full effect. And there are still people that are testing positive for MGen after 1 or 2 rounds of treatment that still have had a hard time, just because it can be a difficult bacteria to treat. So we want people to understand the importance of testing and making sure that they're being tested per the industry standard and industry guidelines.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for all of the information and the very powerful message too. I feel like if they were not clear before this conversation, I think they will get a lot of clarity from it and know how to move forward and just know how to move through our industry safely, a little more safely. Where can people go if they want to find out more information, especially about MPOWERR and your resources available?
They can go to our website, which is www.MPOWERR, the letter M, POWERR, H as in Harry, WA as in Apple.org. That'll lead them directly to the website so they can read up on a lot of the services that we provide that are not only just industry standard, industry specific services, but as MPOWERR as a whole. But they can definitely find information about testing standards for the industry. They can also go to passcertified.org, PASS certified.org, to find out industry directly from the governing body that oversees adult film safety as far as testing guidelines and testing mandates for the industry.
Okay, and we'll be sure to include all of that information with this conversation. Ebony, where can people go if they would like to follow you and see what you're up to?
You could just Google me, Ebony Mystique. You're gonna find something. What I would say is I'm a very caring, loving person. I do care about my co-performers and in the industry. I'm happy to be here. Just to say that. But as far as things that they would need to know for their own personal self, working as a sex worker, like MPOWERR just said, definitely hit up MPOWERR. You can get tested not from home. It's the mail order with the swabs, as I mentioned before, and you can go to your LabCorp. That's still because he's past certified, he's running a test. That is still industry standard testing, just because you're on LabCorp. It's just a drug facility. So do you still accept insurance or some?
We do still work with some insurance providers. We are working to be able to accept a lot more insurances. But if people have insurance, we want to give them the opportunity to try to use it if it works. But once again, that goes back to people understanding, what they may have access to and understanding their insurance plans, because we don't want people to think just because they have insurance that automatically is going to be covered. Depending on where they are and where they're receiving the services and things of that nature, and the type of insurance coverage that they have will determine if they can use their insurance for testing. And if it can, we welcome it.
And I believe he's one of the only labs that does offer that. So that's cool. But yeah, pass is like, now they know, like that's where you go. That's where you go. Word of mouth is cool. And that learn it from another performer. Hey, I didn't get swabbed before. And like my story I just told you, now if it's like, why wouldn't you want to get swabbed? I just told you without the swabbing, I still was unclear to work. Take it from your fellow girl, your fellow guy, because you don't want to be that girl or that guy. It is a risk, but it's better just to not have to go there. Just try to be more due diligent about your life, yourself, and I think things will get better. Yeah.
Wise words to end with. Thank you again both so much for the information today and taking the time out of your schedules to share with the community. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you for
Um,
having us. Thank you.